like how he's seeing Stanfield Jones's diary. He says, "I think you are the real man and will attain. You work hard and regularly and keep the record well. And you have the root of the matter in you. These are your dangers. 1. You are emotional. This is very bad and must be got rid of. It's a form of egoism and leads to the left-hand path. You say, I object to my wife being run over by a motor car and think you are stating an eternal truth. Now, no elephant in Siam cares whether she is run over or not. Say then, it is relative to VIO, his magical moniker, right that he should object, etc., etc. Use this analysis with all emotions. Don't allow yourself to think that your own point of view is the only one. Read Liber 65, and he gives a couple examples of passages. This is extremely important. For one thing, if you fail to understand, you will go mad when you come to a certain grade." So again, the objectivity is what he's emphasizing here. If you get too locked into your own tangents, this is, probably the reason why a lot of people who are studying the occult or get really into magic and mysticism and that sort of thing tend to sort of lose track because they lose objectivity. They're not able to stand back and look at themselves objectively. They get off on some kind of a tangent that takes them into a really bad place.
So what was it saying about his wife getting upset that his wife got fired?
Oh, I think that's just basically using that as
an example.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there's a lot of talk about bringing this work back into Melku, and then obviously on some level you have to be upset if you win a car.
No,
you can't just be like, well, whatever.
Absolutely, yeah. But I think this is
just for the journal. It doesn't matter.
Well, it's like you have to keep yourself objective. You do want to keep, obviously, you do want to care about people, and you do, obviously, that's going to be an important thing in your life and that sort of thing. But for the purposes of your spiritual progress, it's important, especially from the outset, to learn to keep an objective point of view because of the fact that when you're too subjective to something, you can be too passionately tied to it and lose perspective as a result. Yeah, and a good example of that is politics. Politics is such a polarizing sort of thing where you get really passionate about one side or the other to the point where you cannot listen to anybody give you any ideas from the other side, and because it's just you get disgusted with it and it's like, I don't want to even think about that. And any kind of admitting that you're right about something is some kind of conceding, and I can't do that. So I'm absolutely right, and you're absolutely wrong, and if you believe in this, then I can't believe in that. You know what I mean? So you lose that objectivity, and you can't sort of, you lose some degree of balance as a result as well.
So he's not saying to not care.
No, but for spiritual progress, I think he's referring to the spiritual progress. It's all well and good that, again, he says that you should say it is relative to you, or if it's me talking, I would say it's relative to Darren White that I wouldn't want my loved one killed in a car accident, obviously.
Yep.
But for my spiritual purposes, that's neither here nor there, and it's more of a distraction than anything else.
Yeah, but they should be
I think his point is that your opinion isn't the only opinion. You're sad your wife got hit by a car, but maybe there's a reason for this. Maybe part of her development was to get injured so she could get better. Because when you're hurt, you're in a state, right? It's sort of.
There are from any adversity we can.
ways to look at it. I was just curious about what.
Yeah.
I understand.
And I think also, once you do attain, and if you were to become a master of the temple and then come back into the world, of course, there is that degree of, you're still working in the world and that sort of thing, so you are. But the idea is that you are in a better relationship to it. You're a better relation now. So it's the type of thing that, at first, to some extent, you have to separate yourself from the world. On our path, we live in the city and that sort of thing. We're not going to be monks in a mountain and, separating ourselves in that sense. But, there is a sense that you do have to separate yourself in the alchemical way of putting yourself into a dark place and being separated in order to gestate into something else, or what have you. So part of that, the solve coagula, you want to be able to separate yourself in order to reassemble all those pieces in a more refined state, or rarefied state. So yeah, there's legitimacy But again, it's the subject to which he's specifically referring to, which is not that there's anything wrong with worrying about loved ones or anything like that by any means, of course. But so now on to his second point. You are inclined to vagueness. This is evidently partly caused by the fog of your emotion. Before you can pass to zealoter, you must know and rule the astral plane throughout. Astral journeys, however interesting and even splendid and illuminating, don't count unless they are willed. If you want to go to your office and you find yourself at the town hall instead, it's no excuse that the town hall has fine columns. You should drop all meditations on love. And he puts that in quotations, meditations on love. What's the matter with hate, anyway? From beyond the abyss, they look as alike. They look as like each other as two new pennies. You really mean reflections on love, or Jones's night thoughts, or idle thoughts of an idle fellow. It's a soul-destroying, mind-fuddling practice. If indulged in, it will absolutely ruin all power of concentration. So obviously Crowley's really hitting that emotional aspect on the head there. And this is, again, because we want to keep that level of scientific aspect of things, because it's so easy to lose perspective in this kind of work. Okay, so I guess the next thing we can talk about is we can actually talk about the form that the diary takes. The most common thing is to be taking paper, like keeping paper diaries. And it's also the most romantic, I think, as well, because of the fact that it's just really cool to be, keeping these notes in a nice book that you've gotten from, leather bound and everything like that from downstairs here at the world's biggest bookstore or something like that. How practical is that? That's a really handy sort of way of keeping records, because the way you can draw things out and you can sketch things, you can, if you have little diagrams or little shapes that appear in your meditations or what have you, you can keep track of these things by actually drawing them out. So the paper diary is a tried and tested sort of process of keeping tabulation of things. Personally, I've gotten really into the habit of keeping digital diary, to the point where I'm not really keeping a paper one as much, but I go in and out of that. I'll go through long periods where I'm just keeping a digital diary, or I'm keeping a lot of paper diaries. The digital diary, a lot of people have talked about in the past problems with that, which are obviously things like you could have your whole thing wiped out. If you're keeping a diary for a long period of time, like months or years, and then your file gets destroyed, you're like, damn. So that's something you got to be really careful of. I think probably the best thing to do is to keep a paper diary and be transcribing it onto a computer at regular intervals, so that you have a digital one as well. That way you've got it in a couple of different places. With the digital one, you're a little bit more limited because you can't draw things out, you can't sketch things, you can't, you're limited by that. Although one thing I have heard of is keeping a diary digitally and then eventually, like every so often, printing it off. Again, that doesn't really help you if it's after the fact and you haven't already drawn those little diagrams and things, unless you do it on the day. Some of the pros to keeping a digital diary, though, also include, like, for instance, you can keep several diaries. If you have your computer, you could have several files, and I was doing this for a long time, for a few years, keeping several files in which I would keep different diaries. Like, for instance, I'd keep my general diary, and then I'd have one that I could keep just for dreams, and keep track of any dreams in that. Or if I had gematria stuff I was paying attention to, I could have a diary just for keeping track of geometric stuff that I happen to be finding. You can keep a philosophical one, or like however your sort of view of things is changing. And you can keep adding entries that seem to be relevant to that. In fact, if you have one file that you're keeping all your normal diaries on, you can sort of cut and paste things into those things